The COVID-19 pandemic has been a massive burden on Nigeria's fragile healthcare sector, but a lot of credit is being given to the country's health professionals who have been giving their best to mitigate the impact of the contagion. To get this far, however, there is an older generation of Nigerians who have made the required sacrifice, doggedly pushing the boundaries in their respective fields, despite dwindling government subventions and budgetary allocations. One of such dedicated Nigerians is now joining us on the morning show, and he is Prince Julius Adelusi-Adeluyi, founder and chairman of Julie PLC, the first indigenous clay company quoted on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, as well as national president of the Nigerian Academy of Pharmacy. Prince Adelusi-Adeluyi, renowned pharmacist and legal practitioner, also was Nigeria's Secretary for Health for 83 days that the 83 days that the interim national government headed by Chief Ernest Shonekan lasted before the government was toppled by the late General Sani Abacha. We shall be touching all these areas of professional and political accomplishment, but the core of the conversation will be on his life and times, because on August the 2nd, 2020, Prince Julius Adelusi-Adeluyi will be clocking 80. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the Morning Show.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
And thank you.
First of all, happy birthday in advance, as they say, because you'll be 80 on August the 2nd, and we thank God for your life. But how has it been? 80 years. I mean, at the time you were born, it was almost a mistake. I mean, there was no plan to have more children, and then you arrived. How will you say the circumstances of your birth have influenced your journey through life? Do you want to take us through the early beginnings?
Thank you, Ruben. And thank you, Adeswa, as well as Rufai. You're all doing a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Let me begin by thanking Almighty God for giving me a space on this earth, a clement space, for giving me a place to stand in my own little corner, to move my own little world. And I also thank God for giving me a guided pace as I travel along my own life's path, the ups and downs. I thank God. I also thank my family that has been with me thus far. I may be the chairman of the family setting, but the real MD, CEO is my wife for nearly 50 years, Julia. And she has stood with us in the family, very steadfast, very loving, a good manager of people. And I thank her for her care. I also thank God for the children He has given unto us. They have more than met expectations. And I think it is also fitting on this occasion to thank my friends, my colleagues, very eminent persons who have thought it fit to make certain arrangements to mark this 80th birthday. May they be rewarded faster and better than they have budgeted. Ordinarily, I say to myself, in a Nigeria where we tend to over-celebrate and underachieve, one should just be in one's little corner to thank God Almighty. And I also want to thank Arise Television for making this happen. You have referred to my childhood, and the truth is that I was the last of several children, not expected because they thought they had finished with the child-rearing business. I came out rather delicate, and that's about it. And I had to find my way thanks to my parents and my guardian. Thank you.
Well, can I just say that 80 sure looks good on you? And still talking about your childhood, there is a story I came across that at the age of 5, you were sent away from home to go live with missionaries. And you didn't return until 20 years later, which is 15 years away from home. Would you say that was an expression of care from your parents or just a way of getting even?
No, certainly no. My parents didn't need to get even because they were not expecting me. They showed me a whole lot of love. Even though I lost my father when I was only 12 years old. But I can tell you that the heavens have come together to furnish me with the experience that is necessary to go on in this life. Also, going to the mission is one of the best things that may have happened to me, in the sense that the other children were going to farm and such other errands. But in my case, being delicate, I was kind of home, mommy's child. And this missionary came. His name I will never forget, and I will always adore. Excuse me. Is Monsignor Anthony Ogunleye Oguntuye, the very first person to become a Catholic priest in Ondo State then, but now Ekiti State. He picked me up at about 5 years of age, and you can see I was donated to him by the family. But when I got there were quite a few other kids, but somehow I was the only one that lasted long. He took a particular liking to me. And by the age of 6, I was already typing on his typewriter. I was more or less a little secretary. Here was a man who wrote his sermons. Here was a man who became an author on several topics having to do with the Catholic religion and its history. And rapidly, by the time I was 9 years old, I was already typing proficiently. And one thing led to another. We stuck together until I graduated 20 years later.
You keep repeating the word, I'm delicate. Can you expatiate on that? I'd like to know why you keep saying the word, a delicate child. And secondly, what are those fond memories of childhood you have, staying with Monsignor and evolving and growing up, in your Catholic faith and your outlook of life? And would I say that prepared you for the wider world? Because you took some great risk in your life, you never saw color as a factor. You always went for it and achieved what you wanted to achieve.
Rufai, thank you for that. One of the best things that happened to me, call it serendipity, was going through that space of the Catholic mission. From there, I learned a great deal. You learned to be very simple in your approach to things, but dignified. You learned to be very humble without being stupid. And you learned to be very orderly and then you had to do whatever you're doing to the best of your ability. This complemented what I had again gained from my own parents. My mother, for example, was very close to me, and he taught me how to defend my rights. Don't let any child bully you just because you look delicate, the word delicate you've talked about. But also make sure that coming from this kind of family, you have a sense of assistance to others who may have been less privileged. But my mother was very creative. She was very good in the arts, in music and dance. And these traits I still carry with me But my father was a very calm, very circumspective person. So when you combine all this from the mission, from my mother, from my parents, you get a product like me that has a great deal of contentment and a lot of concern for the fellow man. If you put me in the central bank, I probably would not impress you. But if you put me in the bank of service to humanity, I probably might be able to give to you the deliverables.
I was going to ask you about your educational experience and how you ended up emerging as the Secretary General in 1967 of the International Students Association, and what that experience was like, considering the fact that in 1967 there was a lot of racism. And we had you at the time in 1967 leading or serving as Secretary General of the International Students Association.
Thank you, Ruben. Not to worry about these glitches you're talking about. I remember when I was working as a broadcaster with WMBS, WNTV, glitches came when you least expected them. The thing is to take it in our strides and realize that life is what happens to you when you're planning something else. Thank you for your question. I believe that I was at the University of Ife. I participated rather actively in student unionism, ultimately becoming the Vice President for International Affairs for the National Union of Nigerian Students as at that time. And in that capacity, I was able to represent Nigerian students and youths in several countries. In 1964, there was a world conference in Christchurch, New Zealand, and I was elected as Secretary for the African continent to work at the world headquarters of the organization. And that's how I found myself immediately after graduation going to Leiden in Holland. One thing led to another, and I became Secretary General. It was quite fun living in the air virtually every week and lugging thousands of miles from one continent to the other. But the joy of it was that one was able to relate to students, young people like myself, and we're able to form ourselves into respectable groups. I'm happy that I was able to do this all over the world, all the countries of Africa, all the countries of Latin America, and so on. It was a fantastic training, and this is not a place to go into the experiences.
Well, you are visiting different heads of government, promoting harmony between government and students. Looking back now to what unionism is in Nigeria, what would you say has changed?
Well, Nigeria itself has changed. The world has changed. The setting when we were there as student union leaders was quite different from what we now see. I actually do not blame anyone. I think it was basically a problem of coping with their own situation. The youths of today have to be better understood and supported. In our days, life was a little bit more comfortable. Today's youths are faced with very many challenges. What they need is understanding, not criticism. And if we were to realize that the youths are very important, it's like the local proverb between the new broom and the old broom. The youths are the new broom, and they're full of verve and energy. And those of us who are old, we can claim to have some experience. So the local proverb says, the new broom might be able to sweep very cleanly, but it is the old broom that knows where the dirty corners are. What I therefore like to suggest is that would make more robust the bridges of friendship and understanding across the generations between the old and the young.
Very apt there, because if there's one man that reaches across the aisle in the old and the young in this country, is you, sir. I mean, I met you a couple of times, and the reception was wonderful. Nobody would think that an 80-year-old man can be that receptive of a younger person, and thank you so much for that, you do. I want to know about the journey for setting up Julie Pharmacy and the road to making Julie the first indigenous company quoted on the stock exchange. And I'm sure for business historians out there, what year was this? What's the process like?
Well, having traveled around the world, I had an exposure to the fact that the black man, the black race, has to continue exerting himself to matter, to be recognized, to be respected. So I came back to the country, and I felt it was good to have a pharmacy, since I'm a pharmacist, a company that is indigenously conceived and owned. Then I became the chairman of the indigenous business group of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce. And I took a look at the economy, the larger picture, and found that something like the stock exchange that was formed by Nigerians, people like Chief Ojukwu from the east, people like Sir Mobalagi Bank Anthony. The stock exchange was good, was prestigious, but not a single indigenous company. Cut a long story short, I thought it was important to have one person, and the stock exchange understood us. There was a competitive list drawn up, interviews carried on. Somehow we became the guinea pigs on the stock exchange. But becoming the first indigenously quoted company on the stock exchange has its own pros and cons. You know that if you're a guinea pig, you'll be lucky if you survived it in the laboratory. And if you're a pioneer, you also suffer the flagellations of pioneering. So Julie Pharmacy went on the stock exchange, 1986, big decibels, but then it has had to face the challenges of being a pioneer in this sector. And others who followed have disappeared virtually, but Julie is still in orbit, thanks be to divine grace. But the struggle continues.
Anyway, we'll take a short break now. When we return, the conversation with Prince Julius Adelusi-Adeluyi will continue. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on the RIS News channel. Still with us is Prince Julius Adelusi-Adeluyi, founder and chairman of Julie PLC. Thank you for staying with us, sir. Well, I was going to ask you about your experience as a pharmacist and as a lawyer. You first read pharmacy and then you read law, but it looks like later you focus more on pharmacy. And I would like us to talk about pharmacy. What do you think pharmacists can do in terms of contribution at this time of COVID-19? And do you think that the Nigerian government is providing enough support for the pharmaceutical industry in Nigeria to be able to help address this challenge of COVID-19?
Thank you, Ruben. Good question. I should state emphatically that some of the best trained professionals anywhere in the world are pharmacists. I say that because I have been able to go through experiences in other professions. Pharmacists, jointly and severally, want to make their contribution to enhance the effect of the health system in this country. But this is a country where you just have to be patient. Pharmacists have a blueprint that they've made available to government for decades. But in a country where you have policy formulation not being followed by policy implementation, everybody suffers, all the professions, including pharmacy. And I believe that pharmacists are determined to make sure that they matter in the mathematics of the health sector. I'm quite happy that during these COVID days, pharmacists have made their voices heard. If you look, for example, at a point in view, the NIPRD, the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development, the personnel there are very highly qualified. What's the point being qualified, though, if you do not have the means to do it? It's the Badagry people who say, Akwe Mati, Beto Mayon. If you have no money, you are no good. But because of very poor funding of the NIPRD and similar pharmaceutical setups, you never know what they are doing. I can say that Nigeria needs to pump money into research and development. The CBN is making some efforts now. But the critical mass of funding has to be achieved. Now you hear people looking for vaccines all over the place. There's a race to make it, and people are donating billions and billions of naira into the project, and even of dollars, billions of dollars. Here in Nigeria, we make more speeches than actual activity. If you were to empower the NIPRD, for example, you'll find that they will be able to make available through their phyto-medicinal research many relevant items from our fauna and local herbs. For example, we may have heard of Nipresan. Nipresan was researched and brought out by NIPRD for sickle cell treatment many years ago, but they're still awaiting the process of commercialization. We even have another professor there in the University of Maiduguri who is working on local herbs to produce anti-cancer drugs. We have loads of pharmacists who are well wired to deliver, but they have to be switched on by proper funding. It's not enough to say that many things are happening in Europe and not happening here. If we encourage, if we support the scientists from the pharmaceutical sector, they can perform wonders, not only just by researching, but also going through these well-known in silico, in vivo, and in vitro tests of what's already available at various levels. I also believe that Nigerians have to have an attitudinal change. Many things come from Nigeria by way of herbal preparations. We should, rather than just deride them, encourage them, more research, and perfect them, so that we would be able to get onto the platform of nations reckoned with when it comes to giving medicinal facilities.
Well,
As for law,
Go ahead, sir.
as for law, I believe that anybody who is a lawyer is very fortunate anywhere. Law gives you a sense of security, you know your rights and so on. And again, because of my background, I have a very big leaning towards the arts, and law came naturally. 22 years after I became a pharmacist, I went to study law, University of Lagos. And my classmates were like the age of my children, but I enjoyed that time. I remember when I was in the class, on one occasion, His Excellency, now His Excellency, Vice President Oshibajo strolled in his jeans and some kind of unimpressive shirt. And he came to teach evidence. And I'm saying to myself, but by the time, he had no books. By the time he finished delivering, I respected him a great deal. And it's also made more clear to me that you do not judge the bottle, but the drink inside. It was quite bright. But in law, you find that once you have it, you've had it. You don't have to practice. I practiced for some time with Chief F.R.A. Williams on his black table at the very level of the High Court, the appellate courts, and the Supreme Court. I enjoyed all that, but I thought that pharmacy needed my continued assistance and participation, and I find myself there. In the meantime, of course, I do very, very quietly on the pro bono side. Many of my friends, lawyers, still come. They knew I was very interested in legal drafting. So when they are drafting their whatever for court processes, they still come. It's all pro bono. Life is about service without counting the costs or returns. And I'm happy that I'm able to do not just pharmacy and give service, but also law and provide opportunities to help people.
Very well said. Well, earlier we talked about your impact and accessibility to world leaders, even as a Nigerian student. Given your considerate contact to world leaders and your knowledge of how the world really works, at the moment we have a Nigerian gunning for the WTO DG position, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She's one of the 3 Africans gunning for that position. Africans have never had it. What would be your advice to her? And what should we be doing as a country?
Well, first of all, who needs to advise Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala? Ngozi is like a sister to me. And I know that she commands respect. She's knowledgeable. And whatever she puts her hands on, she will get. This time around, I want to say prayerfully that she gets it, because the WTO is the one to gain from it. At some stage, you know, Egypt had said she had come in too late with her application, which the WTO itself then clarified. But Nigeria should continue to flex its own muscle. The moment we say we have a candidate somewhere, everything should be done by way of advocacy to make that candidate win. Now, the current DG is Roberto Azevedo, the Brazilian, who is the 6th DG, and he's living a year ahead of time. I know that the WTO, Nigeria was one of the founding members in 1995. I believe that if all things are fair, Okonjo-Iweala should be able to come out tops, because she will bring into it her experience, and her ability, you've seen it from the adverts that you are carrying, her ability to make a change for the better. But more interestingly, her ability, having been our finance minister twice, and also coordinating minister, her ability to urge Nigeria to wake up and participate more meaningfully with enduring legacies in the world monetary arrangement. Okonjo-Iweala has been very active in the Bretton Woods instruments, and she needs no advice as to how to go on to continue to make an impression on behalf of ourselves and also on behalf of Nigeria and the black race.
Right, real quickly, your birthday message to Nigerians as you clock 80. Your birthday message to Nigerians as you clock 80, sir.
That's a chunky one. I believe really that the Nigerian space has turned out to be a rather difficult one to describe. Many people have said that there is no hope for Nigeria. I would like to differ. I'm a little bit familiar with many other countries of the 55 countries in Africa. I'm a little bit familiar with other countries in Latin America and Asia. They all have problems. The difference is what is the attitude we have to solve some of these problems. In Nigeria, we tend to sweep a whole lot of things under the carpet. So the carpet was rather flat and well laid a few years back, 20 years back. But now we've swept so many problems under that carpet that it's not, in fact, smooth anymore, and everybody knows. Some people have said that Nigeria is a country with unfinished greatness, what the Spanish call grandeza incubada.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for joining us this morning on the Morning Show. Quite an engaging conversation there with Prince Julius Adelusi-Adeluyi, who will turn 80 on August 2nd.